the human and divine. To carry out our biblical tasks, we are to draw on God's supernatural strength, but at the same time, use our God-given abilities. Here now is Dr. Gene Getz.
This principle certainly grows out of the whole biblical story. And we see this, however, in a very unique way here in relationship to the prophecies that Haggai was giving to the children of Israel. And of course, he told them that they were to continue to build that temple. That was the charge that God had given them, even though that charge came through a pagan king and then was reaffirmed, of course, through Haggai, the prophet, who actually returned with them with those 50,000 Jews that came back from Babylonian captivity. And they obeyed. And that's why I call this first principle, or this first caption on this text, the remnant's obedience. And here's what we read in verse 12. The remnant's obedience. Then Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, the high priest Joshua, son of Jehozadak, and the entire remnant of the people obeyed. In other words, obedience happened as a result of Haggai's prophecies to continue to rebuild the temple. Zerubbabel obeyed the governor. Joshua obeyed the high priest. And as a result of their model and their teaching, the remnant obeyed and they continued to build. So we read, the entire remnant of the people obeyed the voice of the Lord their God and the words of the prophet Haggai, because the Lord their God had sent him. So the people feared the Lord. And again, there we see the word fear, not as cowering, but recognizing who God is, that he is the holy God, and he's given them this directive. And he said, I will be with you. This deals with God's divine presence. So we read, Haggai, the Lord's messenger, delivered the Lord's message to the people. I am with you. This is the Lord's declaration. Now that's the priority. And God wanted them to know he was not asking them to do something by themselves. And they took great encouragement from that. And then from there we see human responsibility. In verse 4, even so, be strong, Zerubbabel. And of course, he was the governor. This is the Lord's declaration. He gives the same directive to Joshua. Be strong, Joshua, son of Jehozadak, high priest. Be strong, all of you people of the land. We read earlier that these men obeyed and all the remnant obeyed. And so God said, be strong, all of you. This is the Lord's declaration. But then notice what he says here. Work. There's the balance, isn't it? I'm going to be with you. I'm going to give you strength. I'm going to help you. I won't forsake you, but you got to work. That's a pretty strong word. Work. For I'm with you. There you see the balance. You're not going to be working by yourself, but I'm going to be with you. The declaration of the Lord of hosts. And of course, as a result of that obedience, we see the result, the actual completion of that temple. And we get that perspective from Ezra chapter 6, when he recorded what actually happened. And we read this, so the Jewish elders continued successfully with the building under the prophesying of Haggai, the prophet, and Zechariah, son of Iddo. Now let me just simply say that these two prophets were fellow prophets. They both returned from Babylonian captivity. Haggai prophesied first, and then coming right behind him, as we'll see when we get into the book of Zechariah, he too prophesied. So here we have reference to both of these men, both of these prophets. Haggai, Zechariah. They finished the building, that is, the people finished the building according to the command of the God of Israel and the decrees of Cyrus, Darius, and King Artaxerxes of Persia. You can see that this building process extended over a significant period of time. In fact, almost a a century to complete the rebuilding of the temple and the process that they were going through. This house was completed on the 3rd day of the month of Adar in the 6th year of the reign of King Darius. So here we have the completion of this temple because of this balance between the human and the divine. And as I was thinking about this balance, my mind went ahead about 92 years, almost a century, when Nehemiah, under King Artaxerxes, came back to help them to rebuild the walls and the gates of the city. Because after the temple was rebuilt, there was a tax on the city, the walls were broken down, the gates were burned with fire. Nehemiah was still a servant of the king, King Artaxerxes, and God worked it out for him in a very special way to return and help rebuild those walls. But they faced a lot of persecution, tremendous persecution. And I think one of the most beautiful illustrations of this human and divine is when they were surrounded by their enemies. And it says there in Nehemiah, they had a sword in one hand, they had a trowel in the other, and they were talking to the Lord and saying, God, we need your help. We can't do this by ourselves. In fact, it says they never even went to sleep. They didn't take off their clothes. They worked, and they worked, and they trusted God. And here's the amazing thing. We read about it in chapter 6 of Nehemiah. The wall was completed in 52 days. Unbelievable time frame. On the 25th day of the month, Elul, when all our enemies heard this, all the surrounding nations were intimidated and lost their confidence, for they realized that this task had been accomplished by our God. And that's the ultimate truth, isn't it, in this balance? No matter how hard we work, we couldn't work without God, the very air we breathe, His blessing. But there's that balance, the human and the divine. God is with us, but we have human responsibility. And as I think about that, as I think about the New Testament, my mind goes back to Ephesians, wonderful New Testament book, where Paul says that we're chosen in Christ before the foundation of the world. We are saved by His grace through faith, but we are His workmanship, and we are to work out this salvation. We are to be active. We are, as Paul said, to walk worthy of our great calling in Christ, and that's human responsibility. And all the way through Ephesians, he tells us where to walk, how to walk. Walk in the light, walk in love, walk carefully. But then he ends up with that great culmination, when all's said and done, be strengthened by the Lord. Isn't that an incredible balance? Be strengthened by the Lord and by His vast strength. How do we do that? Put on the full armor of God so you can stand against the tactics of the devil. Satan is alive and well. He was in Haggai's day, Zechariah's day. He's active today. But we can win the battle. But Paul says our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the world powers of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavens. This is a spiritual battle. In the Old Testament, we see many times the battle against flesh and blood. But it was also against Satan. Our battle is against the principalities of this world, the evil in this world. That is the battle that we're really in, and we need to be strong in the Lord. And we can be with that balance. And so I leave you with this question, this reflection and response question. Why is it so easy to become imbalanced in living out God's will for our lives? Well, I can speak to that in the sense that it's just a natural tendency. You know, when things are going well and you're being productive, and it's very encouraging to keep being productive. At least I'm motivated by success, by achievement, by getting things done. And I think we're supposed to work. We're not to be sitting in our rocking chair saying, Lord, do it. We're to be up and around working. Now, the fact is that I find in my own life that when things are going really well and things are being very productive, I look back and I say, how much have I been trusting God in this? How much have I been praying about this? How much am I really looking to the Lord for this success? And as I'm sure happens in your life, the Lord reminds me of that periodically. And I think he purposely kind of pulls the rug out from under me. So I'm sitting there wondering, okay, Lord, what do I do next? I don't know where to go or what to do or how to handle this situation. And suddenly I realize I need to talk to him about this. And it brings me back into balance. And so I think it's a human tendency. But I think we need to go back to the Scriptures, remind ourselves that here's this principle that we need to apply in our lives. And it's called the human and the divine principle. To carry out our biblical task, we're to draw on God's supernatural strength, but at the same time, use our God-given abilities.